And a very good evening to you, and welcome to today's edition of Politics 101. We are on, so please share the link and let everyone know that we're ready to roll. It's that time. Dr. Henry Jeffrey is with us this evening, and we are, of course, going to continue our conversation. Dr. Jeffrey's column this past weekend was the let me get it here, the programmatic suppression of Africans, and we are going to use that as the lead off for our discussion this evening. So please share the link and let everyone know wherever you're joining us from. It's Politics 101 on a Thursday evening. So please share the link, and we'll get started with Dr. Jeffrey.
You know, people ask me all the time, why do you do this? Why do you not retire and read books and write fancy academic papers? And I say, yes, that is also important. But what is more important is that I was given an opportunity to read books in the first place, to engage with ideas because of the sacrifices of ordinary. And so part of scholarship must be given back to the people in the form of public engagement. If myself was a public scholar, what we call an activist scholar or a scholar activist, who's always trying to use the knowledge that is gained from reading books, from observing people in their communities, in their society, and giving them back, in the words of a UC Guyana, giving them back to the people as a political nourishment and by extension, cultural nourishment. That's what I'm about. It's about being that public scholar whose work is not just confined to the classroom, but that classroom is extended to the public space.
Yes. Again, good evening to you. Good evening to all of you, wherever you're joining us from, whether you're joining us from in Guyana or outside of Guyana. Welcome to Politics 101. Welcome to Politics 101. It's Thursday. Dr. Jeffrey is here, and we are going to be talking about a range of issues. As you know, the situation with the vendors at the seawall, and I noticed in today's newspapers that the government seems to be backing off or backing down. I don't know. I don't know why these fellas engage in that kind of stuff, and I just don't know. A different breed. Jeffrey will help us understand what's happening there. The court has ruled that the teachers' strike was justified, and that the government should not be deducting from their salaries. In effect, what the court has done is work out the parameters for a legitimate strike. The court seemed to be saying, so long as the union would have exhausted all possibilities, and there is no other option left, and they go to a strike, then the principle of no work, no pay doesn't kick in. The government is saying that the court is inviting anarchy, but the court is clear as to when a strike is legitimate and when the principle of no work, no pay can kick in. It doesn't kick in once the strike is legitimate, and the strike is legitimate once the union would have exhausted all the options. So the court in effect is saying that if the union did not exhaust the options and then go on strike, then perhaps then the principle of no work, no pay will kick in. So the court has set parameters, but the government is saying the court is not is inviting anarchy, and they have decided to appeal this case. Instead of taking the way out, I think the court gave them a way out. They could have said, we disagree with the court, but we are going to obey the court. But they're appealing. They're appealing. They're appealing. So we have that there. Last evening I was on GlobeSpan with talking about ITPADG's submission and the government response to the submission. And as usual, we try, but I don't know how much further we can go. I think it did not dawn on my co-panelists that it was the government responding to ITPADG, and they acknowledged that the government was giving the Indian narrative of Guyana's history, and they thought it was a good thing because the Indian narrative should be, when I pointed out to them that this Indian narrative is not coming from an Indian organization, it's coming from the government of Guyana. They seem oblivious to that. ITPADG, of course, made its submission on behalf of African organizations, charging that the government is not living up to its obligation of the decade. And the government is saying, well, we have no obligations under the decade because our laws are in order. We don't have discriminatory laws. And in any case, if Africans are in bad economic condition, bad economic state, it's their fault. They made bad decisions in the 1800s. And so that's where they are. This is the government saying that, When the government under the decade is signed on to comply, and the United Nations is saying laws have been passed since independence, but those laws have not gone far enough in terms of righting the wrongs of enslavement and post-enslavement. My brother Timothy Jonas said that, well, Guyana is so different from other places. Nobody sitting at the back of the bus, and even during colonial times, nobody sat at the back of the bus or forced to, as was the case in South Africa or was the case in the United States during segregation. And I had to remind him that African Guyanese may not be sitting at the back of the bus, but they are at the back of the line when it comes to contracts, when it comes to so many things. He acknowledged it. And this is what we're talking about here. It's not the formal laws and so on. It's the way in which the government goes about its business, that governments, in spite of laws, formal laws, can seek to do damage to groups in the society. And that is why Jeffrey's talking about the programmatic suppression of Africans. You can have all the wonderful laws, and the government is going to try to get around the laws. And so that's why there's need to make some of these laws entrenched in the Constitution. So we are we are going to have to continue this conversation. We definitely have to continue this conversation because it's important. It's important, you know. Ipadaji, of course, pointed out that Amerindians at the time of independence were granted lands. The state made compensation to them. And that Indians they had access to cheap land and so forth. And they seem to interpret that as Ipadaji saying to Indians, you're wrong. But Ipadaji is not saying that it's wrong for the state to compensate Amerindians and East Indians, but they're also saying that the state has a responsibility also to African Guyanese. And this is where we are. Good evening to all of you. I notice you all are coming in, and we are ready to start our conversation. Dr. Jeffries' column this week is the programmatic suppression of Africans. The programmatic suppression. Let's bring in Dr. Jeffrey and let's get started. Yes, it's about that time. Dr. Jeffrey, good evening.
Hi, good evening, David, and good evening to your audience, and thank you again for having me.
Yes, I know you hang out in BV.
Yes, I do.
Your home village, and I know wherever one goes, when one goes back to the place of your birth, you feel a sense of protection there, built into it. But I do, and I do assume that you may get around to one or two places. Have you ever made it out to the seawall where they have the story going on there now?
Yeah, well, not now. I've not been there for a long time, but yes, well, essentially, if you do things properly in the first place, that could not have happened. You would have had proper rules, proper regulations. You would have put it in the press. Everybody will know how you get these things and what arrangements must be made for them to be distributed and under what conditions. And if people were there before, you would have made arrangements to either compensate them or to help them to develop their business. But David, I mean, these things are, it is quite clear that anarchy works to the benefit of the PPP because they can say any old thing at the end of the day. Look, it's them, they didn't do that. But some people were there, some were not there. Just work out rules, call them together, call their representatives together. But you don't even want to talk to their representative, not only there, but even in Parliament. So you have all sorts of major problems if you have decided that the rules allow, and the rules, they do allow the PPP to do what it's like. And essentially, that is the problem in Guyana. The rule allows them more or less to do the things they are doing. And the rule put them in control of the executive and the legislature. This is an ethnic party. The people, when you were saying just now, you were told that the PPP should put forward Indian view. I have no problem. The problem is that the APNU and PNC don't want to put forward the African view. It's not that the PPP shouldn't. I have no problem with that because I know they're an ethnic party. It's when you look at the people like that and they don't want to put forward, not some nonsensical notion that people are going to vote for them. They're going to vote for them anyway. And if those you want to vote for you can't vote for you because you are being wronged, it's better they are not there. I mean, who wants anybody there that don't think you are wronged? and you got to be pampering them to vote for you. What you got to determine and ask for is a proper system of governance that recognize just what you were saying just now. I didn't say it, you said that you were on a program and they said, the PPP put forward an African view. Well, let's build a government that the PNC can put forward the African view and the PPP can put forward the Indian view, because that is the reality on the ground.
Oh, what a start. What they said, I think, what's her name? Carl Boyce Davies wrote a book on Claudia Jones. She called To the Left of Karl Marx. Jeffrey has started off there swinging. And he's right, because I made the point that, I was saying the government ought not to put forward an Indian ethnic view. And Jeffrey saying, well, how are you going to stop that? It's an Indian ethnic party. It's Indians who vote for them. What else do you expect? Therefore, the African party should put forward to facilitate the African view. And the logic of that leads you to a government in which all views, or both views to begin with, are included. And I have to say, the logic of my introduction takes us in that direction. Dr. Jeffrey, your column this past weekend, the programmatic suppression of Africans. Explain what you mean by that title, the programmatic suppression of Africans.
David, from about 2000, the PPP has used every possible means to suppress African representation in every way they could. And not only African representation at the organizational level, like the PNC or the Guyana Trade Union and so on. You see what they did to Critchlow Labour College. You see what happened, and maybe the worst, and I'm writing about that this week, is Georgetown. Look what has happened at Georgetown. Because they intended from day one to win Georgetown, they decided well, Bishop SJ, I think it was who said it, make it clear, if you want a road fix, you got to vote for the PPP. Well, that is essentially what's happening there. They are starving the people of funds, and they have been doing that since about 1997. Let me explain it to you. Georgetown isn't a mess, but it has been a mess so long that before Desmond White, decided that, we need to have some kind of arrangement there and interventions to do things. He went to the IDB and got $2 million. That is about, 1989 or something, for urban rehabilitation project. I'm doing a piece on that today. I want to show you how far this programmatic attempt to destroy Black people and their institution exists. It's not that the Indian people, the Indian intellectuals and PPP intellectuals don't accept it exists, but they want you to believe that it's political. That any political party would have done that. Well, I don't care if any party would have done it. But if they're doing it in an ethnic manner, it adds another dimension to it. This is not an homogeneous society. But let me go back to this thing. So how it went. First of all, he gets about $2 million to do this thing. The people come out, the program come out and say that you must have institutional change. The institution is decrepit. You got build the institution. It's no use you give them plenty money. It's going to go all over the place. But you must have institution. You must build institution itself. So they gave them, I don't know, $8-9 million to it. You understand that the PPP itself, I'm telling you here now, about 1989 or something like that, 1990. You know, in the 2009, they had a report. Well, you remember the Burroughs report or something like that?
Yes, the Burroughs report.
Our Burroughs tell you. Burroughs said all the money was used for infrastructure. Nobody didn't build the institutions. Why didn't they build it? It's deliberate. Because if White could have seen it before 1992 and leave money for you to do it, and the institutions were not built into so they didn't build the institution because they don't want strong institutions. They want weak institutions. So when they have these weak institutions, they're going to blame the people. So you have a choice, as the bishop rightly said, vote for the PPP and live in squalor. And they have done this consistently all the time. People tell you, look, this thing is about politics. It's not. It might well be in their mind, but it turns out to be ethnic, and therefore that must be considered in any framework. I don't know. The teachers thing, I think, is any different. It's no different. What they're trying to do is to keep the teacher until people force them to keep the entire public service. I have called umpteen times, and I see a Padaji calling them. Indeed, the United Nations say they should do analysis. I said do an ethnic disparity analysis since you come to office and see how well Black people are and see how well Indians are. They can't do it because their job, you see, again, you introduced this thing when I was listening to you just now. Yeah, if it's Black people's fault, well, boss, if the Americans just sit down and say that when they were doing in an informal way, the American whites were doing all that, the Blacks, stopping them from going there and doing and making all these same noises. It's Black people's fault, it's Black people. Till people start coming out and say, look, it's the rules you put in place that make they can't move here, they can't do this, they can't do it, and so on. So I'm saying to him, you think I'm wrong? You think everybody, Nigel, everybody's wrong? Do a proper ethnic disparity study to show what has happened under your regime since 1992.
Since 1992.
Yeah.
Dr. Henry
Black
Jeffrey.
people has become poorer relatively, and it's a result of direct intervention by the PPP. They are giving you 5%. I know sometimes as guy include your people too, but the point is, I think they just got lost in the same concept of they are national government for the people. They are giving you 5% that you're supposed to get at the beginning of the year or the end of the year. They use it as like if you get in a bonus, so they ain't gonna give you no bonus. They can not dispute that anymore. And yet, if you're gonna buy 5 oranges at the beginning of a year, you can't buy the same 5 oranges at the end of the year with the same 5%. I mean, this is a joke. And you sit and we sit there and we take it. And I'm not blaming this small man that needs to get some job and they're giving him things and so on. And I think he maybe have more awareness that can take these. But that is what has been going on in Ghana in every area of life. And to demonstrate this, all the PPP needs to do, governance is bad. The system of governance is bad. But if the PPP wants to deny the racist tag, it must do an independent, inclusive, ethnic disparity study. Let's see, they're not from Jeffrey. You know, Britain did it when they start saying that Africa, the West Indian Africans and so on. Britain did it, and they found all sorts of magic. Australia did it. Now you got an ethnic problem. You know who ain't gonna do it? Singapore. I know who will not, and Singapore is autocratic. And you know who ain't gonna do it? Guyana. Because they want to fool the black people on the road that all this is their fault. And they got hangers on who ain't really doing the work, and not necessarily PPP hangers on. We have, but can buy into that narrative. And so just do it. Your job then, even if it turns out to be true, that you have been doing all you can for Africans, and it is their foolishness and stupidity and ignorance that have gotten them in this situation. You got the responsibility to put in place policies to help them out of that situation. As you said just now, you are not a national government, but the truth is you are not a national government. You are a government, an Indian government, and you intend to stay in power as an Indian government, and you got what you got today. And I mean, if people can't see it, they can't see it. But I recognize that sometime up the road, it was 2015, I wrote the book. I reckon, you know, sometimes things come to you not because of you. You remember I told you about Gregory Gaskin?
Right.
It's Gregory brought that to my mind. It's not like I sit down big bright somebody come up with these stupid. It's Gregory Gaskin called me a day outside a Rupert shop. I said, man, think about this. Listen to me, and you think. And then I start looking at this thing more seriously. But you cannot. This is a persistent thing the PPP be doing. It's not new. It's not anything else. It's been doing that since I said, since the Georgetown City Council. So nowadays, when the roof fall, they hear them, and if you hear the meanderings in the editorial that it's the meandering, it might well be. It is the responsibility of the government to properly fund the system, and they have not been doing it by any stretch of the imagination. It is they are withholding funds from the people so that you're forcing them to vote either for the PPP. They want control the major cities. Particularly if you got communist orientation, that's a big thing, you know, you got control the urban area. So they want control, and they have not been doing it. And you know, sometimes I just stand up, when people talk about North and South, they must stand up alone and show them that they ain't going to do it. And he was there to be truthful, but show them, and you and your boys there. But I'm saying stand up and almost alone outside of the PPP and show it's not going to happen. Of course, he had the old ethnic thing behind him. I mean, because when you think of African people stupid because you're giving them a couple dollars on the street and they're taking it and they're laughing, they can go cut the beard, you are joking. They understand, and they are seeing this as a joke, just like you are seeing it as a joke when you're doing it, because you're doing it for this very reason of fooling them.
Right.
You know what I mean? So that is where Guyana is today. So when I say so, I don't care where you go. I don't care which institution you want to look at. From the public service to curriculum, even UG, everything there. Look what's happening there. Yeah? You got gold. You got University of Guyana with proper institutions and so on. And strengthen it and use them. They are giving gold because they got their hand on it and they can determine who gets what, when, and how. And they're giving almost the same amount of money that you give University of Ghana, and then turns to me and says, "You're giving me gold." No, that is not sufficient. You're supposed to stick by the rules and not create things on the side that you have total control over. And as I said, the reform is coming. And it means that the whole system got to reform. The present system is decrepit in terms of our arrangement and culture. It means that the person, the leader of the major political party, controls the president, controls the parliament. Story done. Because if the president go to the parliament, he can almost call out all of the people in the parliament and tell them vote against the president.
Vote against the president. Dr. Henry
So
Jeffrey.
when they run around, Orphan, oh, I'm doing this. I say, Orphan, who are you speaking to? The system says that you control the executive and the legislature, but in fact, it's the leader of the major party that does it. That ain't got nothing to jag you particularly. Anybody be there, it's a corrosive system.
Dr. Henry Jeffrey here tonight. The programmatic suppression of African Guyanese. Dr. Jeffrey, you, IPADG went to Geneva, Switzerland, where they had the special meeting there a week ago, and they sent a delegation there. The government also sent a delegation. But it seems as though the emphasis and the attention was more on what IPADG had to say rather than what the government had to say. And the government, of course, always like Columbus, discovering that people actually are dissatisfied and are prepared to go on the world stage and to express that dissatisfaction. And we understand from the IPADG people that some of the government people were saying them, telling them, asking them, why are they washing our dirty linen in public? Why is it IPADG washing our dirty linen in public? Comment on that.
Because the dirty linen leaving me in poverty and suppression. It not must only be washed in public, must be destroyed in public, and don't ever raise its head again. It is not a question of washing dirty linen in public. You must, the PPP now is under pressure. It's in a serious session. The minute the new regime gets in place in America, they said, what did they say? You have got to get rid of this Venezuela system and develop a functioning democracy. And I said, since that day on, they mess around, they call them to New York, Jack, you and Orphan, whoa, there, you gotta develop an inclusive system, understand? Everybody that's coming, if you look at it, saying it, now they're under pressure. They are under pressure to develop inclusive. When they don't want to do it. It's not part of the modus operandi. So they are under pressure. And that is why you're having them sending all these surrogates around to say foolishness. Guyana, just because how the system is organized, even without racism, is bad. You put a political party in control about the judicial, or both the legislature and the executive. That is what the Constitution does. One seat you need to win to. One. And you control both the judiciary and the executive. And guess when you do that, that's what you mean. You got tremendous pressure on the judiciary.
Judiciary, right.
Tremendous if you don't control it altogether. That's why you see when chaps like Justice can soon come out and do things, you got to praise them. They stand up and so on. But you got to understand the limits to what they've done too. Jack himself said, my Henry Jeffrey, he said, it don't make no difference how many people vote for me. And he's right. Justice could make a difference to industrial relations in Guyana, but he make no difference at all as to how people voted for the PPP. Jack just leave them alone. He said so. He was in the press. Because it makes no difference. If they ain't going to vote for no PNC, so where's the big thing? Yes, they're going to help me. What he has done is to help prevent the suppression of public servants and maybe other workers, because once the state is getting away with these things, other employers take the opportunity. Have nothing to do with politics or not. They're taking the opportunity to do the same. Imagine you're going to tell me, oh, you are found guilty. I mean, 3 years, and then people on strike, and the thing now break down. I don't care. No one man, no one group or institution should be able to say when something break down. If one man said break down, it break down. The collective bargain agreement and Minister of Labor, the collective bargain. Indeed, I did my PhD in industrial relations. So this is not just in the collective bargain agreements are essentially there to stop strikes, not to make strikes. That's why they go the Greek thing, they take the Greek end product as arbitration. At the end of the day, if we can't agree, we call for somebody to conciliate. All right, we don't agree, because obviously it can't be 3 years we talking, and no one man don't talk to you for 3 years and mama guy around and determine the strike will never end because I can do this, I can make a mess around if I want to. There got to be a time limit to this, and 3 years is over that time. And go to America, it's about a couple months, and look at that. 2 years. So the judge found that the union was in this thing and doing it correctly for this time, and they did break down. And you can't then, when it's your fault, as you were saying, you said it. You know, the thing is broken down. I am on strike because you are not coming to me 3 years, and then you are saying you mustn't pay me. Was this slavery? It's your fault. If in 3 years we can't agree on something, do take the next step. And that's how the judge, he says, look, you can't not pay the people and then want to take away the dues from the union. Now, what you are attempting to do is break the unions. Mm-hmm. And I'm talking nonsense. That would mean that employers, yes, but only if the employers did not negotiate in good faith. And if at the end of the day, it could be found that they did not negotiate in good faith and people had to strike, well, then they would have a right to pay, and so it should be. It's not a question of just imagine yourself, pay them. You broke it. You broke the law. You did it. You brought in every good faith. Those people sit down there for 3 years and suffer for 3 years. I mean, I'm talking about teachers in general. But, and then you now believe you alone have the right to determine when this thing breaks down. Well, then it will never be determined because your idea is to suppress me in any case. I mean, it's not just nonsense, but because it's nonsense, but because of our politics, people make sense of it. The PPP try to make sense of it, but you can't make sense of stupidness. If 3 years mean you can't get long, in the first 6 months you could have gone to the court and said, "Look, Chief, we can't get along." People hold on for 3 years. And you telling them, I mean, it's got to be some kind of joke. And if it's your fault, you must pay. Any employer should pay, not just the government. Collective bargaining agreement are there to stop strike, not to bring strike.
Not to bring strikes. Dr. Henry Jeffrey here tonight. The programmatic suppression of African Guyanese. Dr. Jeffrey, staying on the teachers' situation and the intervention of court. The government has decided to appeal. It is saying that the judge's ruling is tantamount to anarchy. Can you please comment on the decision to appeal and the charge of the government, the judge, introducing a system of anarchy?
Yeah, but I just said it's nonsense. The anarchy bit is foolishness. The anarchy bit is just nonsense. Any employer that fails to follow the rule and found guilty that has failed to follow the rule in terms of collective bargaining should pay the people if they strike. So that be their stupidness. But I want them to appeal. I love the idea that they will appeal. But I love the idea too that because I'm reading into this, you see, David, their appeal should not make it possible for them not to pay the people or think during that is why you gotta stop. Let them appeal, because the best thing is for them to appeal. So we're gonna have a definitive statement at the end of the day. Right now, we don't want this thing going around any old thing and say, nah, me don't agree and agree. But all they're gonna have to say, the CCJ said it is. And story done. Now, if you don't do that, you get them leaving there in a haters kind of a thing. And furthermore, you see, one has to be very careful in a sense about things, industrial relation things, because you are just what they are thinking of, that they are saying, oh, employers can do this, workers can do it too. So it must be made quite clear what is going on. So let it go. But in the meantime, the workers must be paid and the dues must continue until the end of the day, because this court found that. So they got to go and find a stop me, I don't know what they call it. They got to go and tell the people must be paid, and whenever the CCJ or wherever the appeal court, wherever finish, that's it. But they mustn't use this as a means of delay and suppression. And they just should be able to understand. If he says so already, because I have not been playing so much things today.
The teachers' strike here and the historic ruling of the court and the government scrambling, as Dr. Jeffrey said, the whole notion that the judge is introducing anarchy is total nonsense. Total nonsense. When a government is reduced to that, then you know what kind of government you are dealing with. Dr. Jeffrey, you traced in your column how we got to this point with it, Padre G, and that it was an overnight thing, where a set of black people just get up and decide that we are going to let the world know about our problems. You trace it back to over a decade that we got to this point. Give us a synopsis, as my friend would say, synopsis.
Essentially what I was saying is that, and the decade is the outcome of a long story. I went to Durban. I was part of the thing in Durban, even before the year. But in about 2010, the UN decided that they would have an year of African descent, starting in 2011, I think it was.
Yeah.
And they call upon governments. Oh, Lord, the PPP government, it says we look forward to working with Africans to improve their conditions and so on. Oh, yes, oh, yes, oh, yes. So the thing came and they set up a committee. They set up what we got a committee now to work out the program for the decade, a national steering committee. But the national steering committee, guess what they did? They left out all representative African groups and put their own people. They put my colleague from UD, James Rose. Well, we know James Rose is essentially PPP as a chairman. They refuse to invite the PPP. Hear the reasoning, the PNC. Hear the reasoning. We are not inviting political parties. Yet they choose their own man. It's like if they are not a political party, we are not inviting because they are not inviting the PPP. They say they can't invite the PNC when they got all the inputs as government into the process. We are not inviting. Then at the end of this process, at the end of the process, there's a lot to say about this process, but it's act the force walk away. I think I said this thing ain't represent nobody, no representative organization. This thing is a PPP program. They came up with a program and they wanted to launch it in 2011, and at just before the launch, Agda said, this is nothing to do with program. I think what they did, when you got your other friends, I mean them, because he was on this national steering committee as Ann Norton and Aubrey.
And Aubrey, right.
Yeah, he was on this national steering committee. I think they invite people in their personal capacity, and there was a talk to the party, and the PI watching around. You're gonna, if you want to go, y'all didn't do the same thing with the Walter and the investigation. Who want to go, come back. So effectively, they went. And this thing come up with some good ideas, I'm not knocking it. I'm not knocking the outcome. But Agda says the representative people of African organization must be start making noise. And Agda said, look, we will not get part of this until we got a program come from an inclusive group of people that represent Africans and others. Well, we ain't going along with it. The whole thing was abandoned. And they said almost, well, not word for word. If you paraphrase what this last go to Geneva the other day and said, it's almost the same thing they said about a year. And it was abandoned. Totally abandoned. And look how long they spent it there. So I did that just to show that the people has no interest in it unless they can control it. They are people to control it, and once that's stymied, they abandon the whole goddamn thing. And that's where we are. They want to control the system. And furthermore, you should try and get a copy. I must be advanced somewhere, if I can find it on the net. But it's not bad things. It's all sorts of things there. They almost associate governance. That's why I said in the paper somewhere that these people recognize, even their own group recognize that that Black people is living in an unequal context. Their own group. So there we go. So essentially what they're saying there the other day, they said over a decade ago, it's just repeating, regurgitating the same crap, and nothing's going to be coming of it. No, until the PPP can do what it likes with Georgetown, Crichelo Labor College, the University of Guyana, everything they destroy the bauxite fund under notion that they're giving back the money democratically to the people. Well, let them give us our money democratically. I don't even want to sell it for me. I want the barrels. Tell me how much barrel of oil I gotta sell it myself. If they think they're gonna tell people stupidness and it, I mean, but that's where we go.
Dr. Henry Jeffrey here, warning us. I pulled out Dr. Jeffrey's book last night because I wanted to go back to see how how long he has been, excuse me, warning us political and ethnic dominance in Guyana. You should pick it up. It's on Amazon, and Dr. Jeffrey has been ringing this bell about political dominance, and it's now coming to fruition. In fact, it's coming out in the public space largely because other groups in the society, other voices in the society have taken it up. Ipadaji has really become a thorn in their side because Ipadaji is using all the platforms available to it in order to demonstrate what's going on. And so the government has to answer one way or the other. In case you're just joining us, yes, it's Politics 101, and Dr. Henry Jeffrey is here tonight and a Thursday night. Tomorrow night, Eric Phillips is going to drop by because Eric himself was in Geneva. He was there as a representative of CARICOM because he's the vice chair of CARICOM Reparations Committee. So we're going to have Eric Phillips on tomorrow night to give his perspective from the special conference there. Dr. Jeffrey, we are coming on to Labor Day, May the 1st, and we're going to have that spectacle again of different Labor Day events, FITOG having its own thing, the TUC having its own thing, perhaps the PSU having its own thing. As Labor Day lost its relevance, its significance, does it still have the kind of meaning that it was intended to?
My own view, and Lincoln can tell you that since I was Minister of Labor, I said to him, Lincoln, why you bother with joining back all these things for? Why essentially you don't sit down and accept that you can have different national organizations and they got different interests? The matter will then become, how is it that we can work together to and on different functional programs? Like we have some problems on this thing, or we agree on that, we work together, because you ain't getting back there. The PPP are not going to allow, the government will not allow the formation of a single black or anybody unless it controls the whole black. And that goes without saying. So you can work with the with Gao and all these people, because and let it, this thing about some aspiration that you must have one group is not necessarily the truth. I mean, lots of countries have more than one national group. So think about it, and then you're going to work out a program directly that you can work on together, and those that you got to break lance about. So effectively, that is what should happen. But Labor Day will never, I don't think, never say never, but lose its relevance. Mm-hmm. It's a day that the working class and workers and employers to gotta sit down and contemplate where we are going and where we are not going. The class thing will change. Workers, that what we call in workers now, not like what we used to call workers in the 18th century. You know, now all the workers got degrees. You know?
That's right.
You know?
And driving cars and
Sort of thing. So, but it's how you, it's a discourse about how you fit in the new reality. And now we got artificial intelligence. They might be introducing themselves for some workers just now because they look like they're going to take over the whole show. That, not they, because they're not a they. It's we. It's we that have created that, largely because, and mankind can't help creating it, because if it's one thing that has been consistent throughout human history is the shortening of the working day. Mankind has always been struggling. Mankind don't want to work. By work, I mean forced labor. I don't mean going out and fish and all that, and that don't work. When you are forced to go, even fishing become a chore if you got to do it. If you have to go and fish every morning at 9 o'clock, it become work. So nobody wants forced labor. People will work. People will do labor. Labor is what make us what we are. It's what creates our culture. It's all. But forced labor is what we need, what we have to do. Most of us, just to stay alive. Just to stay alive, you got to get income and all of that. So forced labor, that's what you actually call work. Work is not just Bill Gates don't work. If he don't want to go, he don't go. You know, and that sort of. It's when you have to go. Because if you don't go, your children and you and son, or you can't get the fancy things you want. So Labor Day will never, I don't think Labor Day will be destroyed on, so long as you have human beings around, because of one thing or another, we will always have to collaborate and reflect on where we come from, particularly now, as I said, artificial intelligence is you created them from your laziness. You know, I'm not using laziness in a bad way, no, because all I'm saying, you want somebody to do all the work for you, and you just like, if that can happen, great. Then you can go and fish and play a hockey. Let's hope it turns out like that. Or because as one friend said to me, we are going to be passing something like the zoo, and you will be in there, and the artificial people will be saying, they created us, you know.
Dr. Jeffrey, you know, as we move more and more into the petrol state,
Yeah.
and the coming of new businesses and so on,
Yeah.
is the labor movement? Um, is there a possibility of a resurgence of the labor movement in the context of the petrol state?
You can't have a resurgence of nothing in Guyana as united as the labor movement. There is no labor movement, as I just said. It is diffracted. But the point is, the PVP says, I'm not going to pay nurses, but I'm going to bring nurses. I'm not going to pay doctors, I'm going to bring doctors. I can't run the electricity company, so I'm not going to pay Guyanese people to come and do the electricity. I'm bring some from Cuba. And all of that is because, you know, they don't want to say it, but they think all of this blackout is a whole lot of confusion created by the PNC, and all of that they got in their head. But they don't want to say. So you hear them, are we going for engineering now in Cuba? I mean, what are we doing? And therefore, you know, there is no such thing as labor movement. What we have is a defected country. People, instead of sitting down and say, hey, it's only 800,000 hours at best, we get so rich. We get what we can do for ourselves. And by the way, everybody else, the whole Arab, Kuwait, all them just do it for the people. They got citizens one. There's the persons in Guyana who are citizens of Guyana who are working. Citizens 2 might be people that have migrated and have certain rights. Citizen 3 might be Caribbean people, and you understand me, but they have certain rights. And everybody else can come, but you can't get them rights. You can't get them. But they want people to vote, so they don't care who. They stop looking at us. And therefore, when you are worried about, oh, Exxon should give us more money, the little we get, they're going to dissipate. It will be dissipated because they're not managing in a fashion. They're focused upon Guyanese. Here, abroad, in the Caribbean brothers and so on, they just want sufficient votes. If you can come and give them some votes, they'll bring you from wheresoever, and they'll be power.
Dr. Henry Jeffrey here on a Thursday evening, Politics 101. Dr. Jeffrey, the government has appealed the case. Where do you predict the teachers go next?
Well, the government, the judge has already spoken. And it seems to be that the teachers, the next stage must be the next stage in the regular process, arbitration process. No, in the collective bargaining process. And the next stage I would have thought was conciliation, but I hear them talking about arbitration, but it doesn't matter. But either one. But as I said to you just now, the important issue here must be that the government must not be allowed to get away with not paying the teachers. They must not be allowed to get away with not paying the teachers and not collected union dues. And the judge, because they were found guilty of making the breakdown, so to speak. That is what should happen. And so the next stage for me, I would have thought, is conciliation. That mightn't go anywhere. But the judge may wish again to say something about the nature of that conciliation and how. And then the next case is arbitration, and it ends there. That's my position on this issue. It seems like David has disappeared somewhat.
Sorry, I took myself off screen. I was saying the judge made it a point to reference the Ministry of Labor, the chief labor officer, in a sense charging it with dereliction of duty.
Yeah.
How significant is that coming from the judge?
Nobody had he seems not to even answer because it was a dereliction of duty. The Ministry of Labor got a funny kind of power relations. The Minister of Labor and the chief are supposed to, in terms of arbitration, supposed to be neutral. They're not supposed to be no government. They're supposed to be neutral because they're not only government workers, everybody got workers. And every enterprise have workers. And therefore, they're supposed to be neutral in these matters. And it was clear that if 3 years the chief labor officer or the ministry never say, hey, let's call it George, hey, boss. This is over. 3 years. And you can't say that this has broken down. You got a strike and you're still saying it's not broken down. So who determines when it's broken down? Who? The government alone? One of the parties? Or the context? And it's quite clear that the fact that I'm on strike, that is broken down. So essentially, the chief labor officer, he just did not do his work. But then again, I mean, that's the nature of this government. That's why people are in these kind of position. It's the nature of it. They do and you do what the government tell you, now what the rules even suggest.
Even
And if you do that, that's it.
Dr. Henry Jeffrey, on a Thursday night on Politics 101. Dr. Jeffrey, as usual, thank you very much for coming through for another program. And we'll see you in a couple of weeks. These 2 weeks go quite quickly, but we'll see you in 2 weeks' time.
Thank you very much, David. And thank you, audience.
Dr. Henry Jeffrey, political commentator. You can catch his column every week in the Village Voice, or you can catch it on our website, Dr.David Hinds, GuyanaPolitics101.com, or on any one of our Facebook page. His latest column is, of course, titled The Programmatic Suppression of Africans. It's really a good read, and we sought to discuss some issues arising from that column here this past weekend. Future Notes by Dr. Henry Jeffrey. And I will see you all tomorrow. We will have Eric Phillips, the Vice Chairman of the Caribbean Reparations Committee, the Chairman of the Guyana Reparations Committee. He was in Geneva, and we will get his take on what happened in Geneva and on this very topic, the programmatic suppression of Africans. So until tomorrow night, I want to thank you all again for tuning into yet another edition of Politics 101. And remember, as always, our motto here is love, unity, togetherness, and of course, witnessing for justice and for freedom. Better must come, better will come.